Okay, and we're live. Hi, everyone. We have a really interesting topic and an even more interesting guest today. We have Joe Richards. Everyone, wave to the laptops to say hi to Joe. And Joe has been, in testing space for over 4 years. So she has lots of stories to tell. And she's currently a tester at Ito World. And previously, Joe has been a tester at the Ministry of Justice in the UK. And I think that's the experience that pretty much no one else in the world has had. So I think while we're waiting for other people to join, maybe you can share a bit of about that, because that's super interesting.
Sure. So I worked at Ministry of Justice between 2018 and towards the end of 2020. And my time there, I would say, was character building. It was just a lot going on. It was so dynamic, down to the people, the structures that were in place, the types of projects and products I was testing. It was a real mixture of people. It was based in London, of course, so you expect a lot of different types of people coming from all different backgrounds, and I thought that was great. It exposed me to a lot of different cultures, and the thing about testing is that it needs diversity, and I always champion this. We need to have diversity because you come with your own way of thinking, and there might be things that I see that another person isn't able to see, and vice versa. There'll be things that they can point out that I can't. And having that collaboration between different people, ages, races, genders, it really does make a difference. And that was one thing I really enjoyed about working at Ministry of Justice. I learned a lot as well, because within that setting, there were a lot of contractors. So it meant that, people would stay for long, people would stay for short amounts of time. And be around loads of different people, and I'd be able to ask them, so how do you do this? What processes can you teach me? Because they would have been obviously working at other workplaces, and they bring their skills with them. So I felt like rather than just having a static team, I was able to feed off lots of different types of people, and that was good and bad, I guess, because I learned bad habits, but I also learned really good habits, and it shaped me. I wasn't just learning from one person, I was learning from a whole multitude of very skilled people. So I feel that helped me to advance quicker than I would have if I worked at a smaller company at the time.
How long was the background check before accepting the offer?
I don't actually remember. I don't think it was that long, really, because the way I got into working at Ministry of Justice was through a graduate scheme, and they sorted out the logistics and that kind of thing. It was a setup. I'll mention it in the presentation that I have. The setup was you do your training for an 8-week period, and they find your replacement. So they already had those connections with companies. It just so happened that when I completed my training, there was an available role for a junior tester, and I was placed there.
So it
all
was
the background stuff, I didn't really have any involvement in that.
it was meant to be, basically.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so to everyone, Joe is quite active on Twitter, so please follow Joe on Twitter. And otherwise, I guess let's be starting. And while Joe is launching the presentation, maybe everyone just post in comments, how did you hear about the webinar, so that we know where everyone is coming from. And also maybe what you would like to hear. Also, we'll leave the questions to the end, so we'll do about a 45-minute presentation and then about 15-minute Q&A, and then we're going to be wrapping up. So that's the agenda. So let's dive right in.
I'll just share my screen. Okay, so you should be seeing my presentation now.
Yes.
Perfect. So hello, everyone. And Thank you for joining today and to hear me speak on such a quite a dense topic, I'd say. It's not the lightest of topics that I've spoken about, but yeah, the power of uniting as software testers. I'm quite excited to be speaking about this because for those of you that know me personally, or have worked with me, or even follow me on Twitter, you will know that I can speak about testing for hours and hours and hours. You can even ask my line manager because I speak about testing a lot with him and we have some really great discussions about it. And it's something I'm genuinely passionate about. So having this opportunity to speak on this topic and even be able to have a platform where I can share my thoughts and ideas is great. So thank you to Bird Eats Bug as well for inviting me on. So I guess I'll start at the point of why I chose this topic altogether. So the reason I chose this topic is because during my testing career, I basically came to the realization that there is a lot of power in just being able to collaborate, share ideas, knowledge, problems, solutions, and experience as testers. And I know I'm not really reinventing the wheel here. We all know that. But I do feel like in some spaces, it's lacking that cohesion between testers. I've experienced it myself. And there's times where you can feel quite siloed. I know every company is different and there's different structures and setups, but there are examples where you can feel like you're just in this journey on your own, and any questions that you have, there's not really a space to share them or ask anyone. So that's where this came from. And I've observed in other workplaces that there's not really that discourse that happens amongst testers of other teams. And I feel like that's a shame because, like I mentioned, there's so much power, there's so much benefits and things that you can gain from it, especially when you're looking to do it actively and intentionally, whether it's personal gains, such as advancing your career, or better decision making, feeling connected with others. And it spills out into other areas as well. It's not just a benefit for QAs, it can benefit a company as a whole. So that's really what I wanted to talk about today. And I thought the best way to get this message across in the most effective way, where you can see how I came to this way of thinking, is basically just to share my own experience. So, what better place to start than the beginning? So, here I am. This is me. I remember this was at the start of September 2018. I remember it precisely because I had just completed my 8 weeks of training at my graduate scheme, and I'd become certified in software testing, manual software testing, that was business analysis and project management. And I remember I just landed my first role as a junior tester, which was at the Ministry of Justice, and I was really excited about it. And of course, I was ready to take on the world of software testing. At this point in time, I had the theory, I passed my exams, but I did lack the experience. So, what I was looking to gain from this new role and this placement was just to, get my experience up and get as much knowledge as I could. So I went in there with an open mind. My brain was pretty much like a blank canvas because I knew that I was going to be surrounded with a lot of professionals, and it was my goal to just grab as much as I could and make use of this opportunity. So I knew that if I did that, I would then be able to progress in my career, and you know that would be the direction I would take. And that's basically exactly what I did. I completely immersed myself when I started working at Ministry of Justice, and I joined a team. I've worked with around 3 other experienced testers at the time. I was a junior, so I was basically looking to them for guidance and really evolving in that space as a tester. I had a positive attitude, I had a willingness to learn. I went over and above to try and really understand this role. And I was determined to succeed in this and learn as much as I could from those guys. I remember making a lot of errors and mistakes at this time as well, which is all part of learning. But it wasn't before long that I started to face some struggles. And it took me ages actually to figure out how to word this. But I think the best way to describe it was that I felt like I was just trying to figure things out on my own. And that's not to dismiss the support that I did get from other people, because of course a lot of people were so helpful to me during my 2 years there, 2.5 years there. But I did feel like there were some times where I struggled to get the information that I needed. So I'm naturally an inquisitive person, and I'm always wanted to know more. And I had questions, and the kind of questions I had were questions like, when do you know that it's the right time to stop testing? Do I just keep going on? Do we time block it? How does this work? Because as we know as testers, there's times when you can over test. So you need to have that sense of judgment of knowing. And at the time, as a newbie into the field, I had no idea. I had other questions. For example, when is the best time to do exploratory testing? Is this something that I should do all the time? Is there a time when it's useful and a time when it isn't? How do I come to that decision? And another question that I had as well, along with a whole load of others, was, what is QA's significance within these agile meetings, such as the sprint planning, the retro meetings, pre-planning? Like, where do QA stand in this? What are our goals and motivations, and why are we there? And these were the kind of questions that are not your typical questions, but there were questions that I had that I felt like I didn't know where to get the answers from. And I guess it just comes with experience. But at the time, it was a real challenge for me. And for those of you that do work in testing that are tuned in, you'll know that with QA, it's more than just the technical aspect of it. For example, it's more than just knowing the steps of how to raise a bug, or how to write a test case. There's nuances around it that are almost like unspoken rules, where you just have to learn and pick it up over time. And I know this is true because currently I am training someone, and even though you can tell people how to raise a bug, or how to design a test case, how to do XYZ, there's certain things that they just won't know, especially when it comes to decision making and knowing, how you decide whether to include a bug into the sprint or into the backlog, for instance. There's things like that that are not really spoken about. You just kind of figure it out as you go along and pick it up over time. And it was just weird for me at this point in time, because I had these questions and I knew that everyone around me knew the answers to these because they were doing it. They were just handling the role. But I just needed a way to tap into them and just extract that knowledge that they had somehow, whether it was by a formal method or informally. So I remember asking people at lunch times and just saying, hey, do you know when you're testing devices, are you testing the same test case on every single device? How do you know how many devices you should focus on? And I'd ask these super technical questions, just at the most random times, because I didn't know how else or when else I could ask people these questions. And there was other questions I had that I'd ask people casually, like, "Oh, hey, yeah, but by the way, you know, when you found an issue, but you're not sure whether it's a bug or not, and you just you're not really sure whether to raise it or tell your project manager, like, how do you handle that?" These are the kind of questions I'm talking about. And, you know, obviously I know now in that scenario, you could have a Three Amigos session and discuss the priority of it and the risk. But at the time, I did not know how to handle those scenarios. Um, and I came to realize that it was just a glaring gap that was there, where I was not able to have a space where I could ask those kind of questions. Um, Sometimes people would have the answers and they'd be like, "Oh, Joe, it's this," and then other times they'd just be like, "Joe, these questions, like, I don't even know, don't know the answer." And thinking about it now, it's funny because these are the kind of questions I post on Twitter today, and they spark a lot of controversy. You know, they're not just simple questions that you can answer. You know, they're questions that really take deep thought, and people have different perspectives. So it's quite interesting that I had those questions at such an early time in my career. But I guess as time went on, it started to have an impact on the way that I viewed testing. And it really started to warp my outlook of what testers did, because no one was talking about these kind of stuff. I'm going to add some things to the slide here. So these are the kind of thoughts I had. So I felt, from my observation at the time, that tests had limited value. We were pretty much at the bottom of the food chain. We just did as we were told. They told us to test this. We did it. No questions asked, no discussions to see whether that was the best approach for testing or not. We just did. And I felt like we had minimal influence in the direction of the product and the quality of the product. Again, because no one was talking. um, and I started to think that if I really wanted to have an impact, a real impact and influence, I'd need to navigate to another area. I saw testing as a stepping stone rather than a destination. And that's quite bad, because testing is so much more than that. And I wasn't able to realize that until way later in my career, in my journey. And although we did have meetings such as, you know, the sprint retros, which are there, you know, which are designed to help people express and share what's working, what isn't working, they weren't really designed for us as testers. It was just focused on a team level and not really the needs and concerns that QAs had amongst ourselves. Um, I eventually moved to another team, and it was a different building, different people, a completely different environment to where I was at, still working for Ministry of Justice. But I felt the same way, even though I did the best that I could to connect with people. I'm naturally a sociable person, so I will find people from other teams. It was still that struggle of just not really having a space where I could ask these questions, you know, and really discuss it with other people. Um, Sometimes I felt like the questions I had were silly, but in fact, they're not silly questions at all. They're just, you know, questions that are a little bit like more than what we would be discussing in the meetings that we'd have. So again, I was left to just figure things out on my own. And of course, there's resources out there. You can just go online and find information, but it's not really relevant to your workplace. There's nothing that beats just having that discourse with someone that works in the same environment as you. So I do remember having huge meetings with like 30, 40 plus testers all together in one room. And even though we did mention things relating to testing, it was more to do with company updates, and, you know, it wasn't really the finer details. of the struggles that we were having and even successes that we had in our teams. So again, that wasn't filling the void. It wasn't filling the void that I was seeking. Eventually, I moved to another team and I became the sole tester on that team. And the other testers I were working with, they moved away and got other roles. And this is what I call the no rules phase. And it sounds quite bad, but it isn't. It's just the fact that I was on my own. What I mean by this is that I had autonomy. I had complete autonomy within my team to do what I wanted to do within reason, of course, because no one else was there to kind of keep me on the right track on what I should and shouldn't be doing and hold me up to certain standards. Because I'm a junior tester and I had no one else to learn from because I was alone trying to figure out things. And it forced me during that time to form a strong alliance with the developers and the project managers and the BAs on my team, because I really leaned on them to give me direction and guidance. And I remember one of them in particular, he had been a tester in his former role. So sometimes when I'd get tickets and I'd be like, hey, like I've completed it, I think it's passed. He'd be like, Joe, have you checked this scenario? Or, X, Y, Z. And I'll be like, no. And he'd be like, okay, I'm going to send it back. And he was great because he had worked previously as a tester. So he knew the kind of scenarios that I should be checking. And that built me up to start thinking outside of the box. And it really helped. But of course, the guys I was working with, they were not QAs. So as developers, as BAs, project managers, they had their own goals, which were different to the goals of a tester. But because I was dependent on them so much to guide me during this process, I ended up, taking shortcuts that now I would never take. And I'd be doing workarounds, which again I wouldn't do now. Other things I'd miss out is documentation. I don't think I ever touched the regression pack when I worked there. There wasn't a regression pack there, but I never used it. I hadn't been introduced to it, and there was no one else that kind of encouraged me to use it. So just scenarios like that meant that I wasn't performing my role to the best standard that I could, because I wasn't getting that exposure or having those QA conversations. And at the time, I was not using Twitter either. So I was pretty much trying to figure this thing out on my own. It did mean that I picked up quite a few bad habits, again, because I had no one to question or give a second opinion on what I was doing. And this is the point in time where I had more I got to a point where I had to make decisions, because as a sole tester on a team, there's situations that crop up and you have to be the decision maker in that. And again, I struggled with that because I did what I thought was best. I don't think I did anything majorly bad, but just if I had someone that I could consult with and say, hey, we've got this coming up and I'm thinking of doing this. Is this how you would handle it? That would have meant a lot, and it would have helped immensely in my learning. So I guess with that being said, that leads me to my key point of this webinar, which is the benefits of uniting. And I guess that's one of the things that I love the most about the company that I work at now, because we have a space where we can ask these questions, no matter how outlandish they may sound or deviant. We can ask them, and it's like we have a collective. So I've added a few benefits here on a QA level. I appreciate the order could be better. I just kind of put them on there as they came to mind. But the first point I've gotten there for the benefit is that it broadens your perspective of testing. being able to be around people in a setting that is designed to discuss QA issues, QA concerns and problems and wins, it exposes you to other people, whether they have other problems on their team that are not relatable or they are relatable. It doesn't matter. It helps you to learn how they handle situations, and you can adopt that in your own team as well. It exposes you to the tools that they're using. Maybe they might come to a meeting and say, oh, I figured out this tool, and it's really useful for this. Maybe that could have been an issue that I had on my team, and I think, perfect, I might try that tool now. Had that space didn't happen, then maybe I wouldn't have had any exposure to that. So the ability to broaden your perspective is so important, because just because you're not facing a particular challenge now, it's not to say that you won't face it, a month down the line from now. Another benefit I've added onto this list is understand lessons learned from other teams. There's been so many times where I've come to these meetings at work, and you've heard someone say, oh, I did this and it was a disaster, it didn't work, or I accidentally did this. It's all learning, and I call it passive mentoring, because even though it's not really applying to me, just me being in that presence, in that environment, and hearing what people have been through and getting that understanding, it's making me think differently, and it's broadening my mind. So that's another valuable thing. You're able to share solutions to problems, and that's both ways. There's been times where I've learned from other people, and there's been times where I've been able to share solutions that I've found that can help others. Greater visibility. This is an important one, because if you work in an organization like mine, where there's a lot of different moving parts, there's different teams, there's going to be overlaps. And having that visibility of what this team is working on and what that tester is testing at the moment, and maybe giving you a heads up of what's to come, that's powerful, because then I can adapt the way I test, and I can be prepared for what's coming up. And next, I have a sense of unity, which is probably one of the biggest benefits, because like I mentioned in my previous role, I felt like I didn't have that sense of unity. I felt alone in trying to figure out problems. But when you have created that environment where you can discuss things like this, it means that you have people that you can offload on, and support each other with. And if a colleague of mine says, oh, I'm going to try and do this on my team, it's like, yeah, go for it. Like, let us know how it goes. And it gives you that confidence. And it also means that because you're able to share things with each other in this way, you form a closer bond. So I remember previously at my old workplace, where, we were encouraged to speak to testers from other teams. But it always felt a little bit awkward, because it's like I only speak to them if I need them, and then I don't really speak to them again. But in this way, it means that, we're getting used to each other, and it helps with the collaborative nature of the role. And I can really say that I've benefited from that in my job. And it's helped to relieve some pressure as well at times, because if I didn't have that space to speak about stuff, I'd probably just, keep it all inside and not have anyone to talk about QA challenges with. Another benefit is that inexperienced testers can learn from experienced testers, and vice versa. Because inexperienced testers are new to the field, they're looking to learn, and if experienced testers can be open and share, what they're doing, give context, there's a mutual benefit there as well, because inexperienced testers, they may be able to come into a setting and they don't have any attachments to the project or to anything. They're new, so they're looking at it with a fresh pair of eyes, you could say. So there's things that, as an experienced tester, or an experienced tester on a team, there's things you may overlook, But if you have an inexperienced tester, they can question things, and you might think, oh yeah, that's a good point that you've raised there. So there is a mutual benefit there. It's not always inexperienced testers learning from experience. It can work both ways. Increased confidence, and this one ties in with all of the rest, because once you are able to get the answers to these questions that you have, and you're learning from other people, you can go back to your team with confidence and be like, oh yeah, I know what's coming up next. And you can better prepare. And it really does make a difference when you're able to speak to others who have had experience and take that back with you to your team. It helps to kickstart new ideas, in particular process improvement. This is something at my company that we're always talking about, how we can do things more effectively. And these are things I think of myself while I'm working in my room. But being able to go to a meeting designed for speaking about QA issues and saying, hey, what do you think about this process? Maybe we could do it better. Or on my team, we're doing it like this. And you can just bounce ideas off each other. And that's awesome. And lastly, on my list, better decision making. So now, whenever I have any situations that arise where I have to make a decision, even though now I feel like I'm at a place where I can, make quite good decisions and I trust my judgment, I can still lean on the people across my organization and the other testers and say, hey, like I'm thinking to do this. Do you think that's a good idea? And I can get a second opinion. Whereas before, I couldn't get a second opinion from anyone. Those are just a few that I've added to that list. Obviously, there's many more benefits and it will differ depending on where you work. But I did want to highlight the organizational level benefits. So, for example, if you have QAs across her organization and they're all working together and collaboratively, and they have this united front, it means that you have a really good functioning QA team within your organization. And it means that you could have process uniformity where, we're all following the same practices, and, there's certain standards and there's expectations. It could make it easier for product managers as well if they're moving to different teams, because they're like, oh yeah, on that team, the QAs do that. And, it's the same thing here. You have that union. Another point on my list is increase morale and motivation. I've spelt morale wrong. And as a tester, that is not good. But so increase morale and motivation. Once you've had these discussions within the QA team, you can then leave those meetings and you feel really fired up. And sometimes there's that healthy competition as well. It's like, okay, that person did that and they were able to increase their coverage by this using this approach, this automation test approach. Maybe, I can do the same on mine. And you facilitate that drive amongst everyone. And that is just unmatched, to have that energy between the testers. It's really valuable. And of course, that would lead to a rise in productivity. It allows for greater movement of testers between projects, because if testers are being open about what they're working on and you're able to passively listen to what's happening, then that means if there was a moment in time where you had to reshuffle, then it wouldn't be so foreign to you to move to a different team. At an organizational level, you'll have greater awareness and understanding of QA. And that happened at my organization, actually, because of the space that we have where we can speak about QA. It meant that I could collaborate with a colleague of mine, and we presented a talk on manual testing with the rest of our company. And that probably would not have happened if, I was just on my own and we never spoke and had those meetings to discuss things like this. And that came about because in one of the meetings that we had, where we talk about QA concerns and random QA topics, we're saying that, some people are like asking, what do we actually do? Or what do testers do? And I realized that when I mentioned that, other people had said the same thing, and they're like, yeah, other people have asked me, what do testers do? And that's how that collaboration came about, where we thought, okay, maybe we should do a presentation and present it to everyone and share the things that we do, and it was really well received. So that allowed us to have greater visibility across the organization as a whole. I've also added another benefit here, which says integration of testing in other areas of development. So for testers, we don't have to just be confined to testing and the life cycle of testing, where we do the research, design a test case, execute, raise a bug, and done. Maybe we could be involved in other aspects. For example, in the planning phase, maybe we could collaborate with product managers. Maybe it could be user acceptance testing. There's other areas that we could be useful in. And with us having a voice, it means that other people within the organization know what our needs are, and they see our strengths, and they could say, you know what, I might get a tester to help with this, because I think that their input would be useful for this certain scenario. And lastly on this list, I've got improvement in product quality. This is inevitable. If the testers are united and we're working together, you're going to see improvements regardless. And I've put and more. These are just a few that came at the top of my head when I was doing this presentation, but I'm sure there's many, many more benefits. And this leads me to my conclusion, which is, where does this leave us now? What can we do with the information that I've shared? What actions can you take as a listener? First thing I have on this list is, don't gatekeep information. Try and be as open as possible and share where you can. Like in my experience as a newbie in the industry, it was a struggle for me to get information from people, and I really had to draw it out of people somehow. Try and make it as easy as possible and create that environment where you can just have a space to ask these kind of questions. Secondly, I put create a space for QAs to ask questions, raise concerns, celebrate wins, discuss challenges, share new ideas, and more. And this doesn't have to be in an overly formal setting. It could be quite relaxed and casual as well, because we all know that when you have a relaxed setting, people become more open, conversations are more free-flowing. It doesn't have to be structured and rigid at all. In fact, I think it's more effective when it is more laid back and people can just highlight concerns without any judgment. And I just want to emphasize here as well that celebrating the wins. There's many times where, as a tester, you'll know that when you're testing and you finally find that bug that you've been searching for, or you've found a way that helps to speed up your test process, and it's like, yay, like you're really happy about it, but there's no one to talk to, because you could tell other people on your team, but they don't understand, they're not testers. It's just something nice about being able to have that mutual understanding. So that's another action you can take, just creating that space. Another thing here is, when training juniors, try and explain the purpose behind certain practices. Like I mentioned at the start, I had a lot of questions and I didn't really understand why we were doing things. I just did them because we were told to do them. And I think it's important that when you are training new joiners who are new to the industry, just to make sure that you're explaining why certain things are done. And as we know, working in Agile, we encourage continuous improvement and learning. And maybe a newbie in the industry could question things and think, hey, like, it works, but it could work better if we did this, and give their thoughts. Because I know I had a lot of thoughts at the start of my career, and I didn't have anywhere to share them or anyone to talk to them about. But that's another thing that I think would be useful and some action that we can take. And last one on my list is embed knowledge sharing within your team culture. Like this, sharing and collaborating and speaking on a horizontal level with other testers on different teams, it should be a part of the cultural fabric, I think. This is just my opinion. Just to give you an example as well, during one of the meetings that we had where I was able to share things about QA at my work, I shared Bird Eats Bug because I remember I was on Twitter. I tweet a lot, as you know, so I was on Twitter, and I think I tweeted something, and Bird Eats Bug Twitter page followed me, and I responded back to them, and yeah, I was like, oh wow, this tool seems really cool. I gave it a go just personally, and I thought it was a great tool to help me, find bugs quicker because, well, there's certain features with Bird Eats Bug that are really useful, and I could have just kept that information to myself and just used it, and that's that. But because we had these sessions with the rest of the testers where I could say, oh, hey, I found this tool called Bird Eats Bug and it does this. And if anyone wants to try it, you're welcome to. I'll show you how to install it. And, that's what happened at my company. And if it hadn't been for those sessions where I could speak about things that came to mind and things that I'd found, I probably wouldn't have been able to share it with other people in my organization. And it also had a ripple effect because I shared it with a few people within my team, and then other people were talking about it. And then, quite a few people now use it. So an example of how collaborating in this manner can help. And I've put here at the bottom, the rest is up to you to decide. I'm not really here to give you the answers. I don't really know the answers, but I can only speak for myself on my experiences. And I know that having listened to this, hopefully it made sense, but having listened to this, you'll be able to think of other actions that you could take at your organization. And I appreciate that every organization is different. So yeah, there may be things that I've missed here that you think of that you could try. And like I mentioned, that this isn't just to help new testers. This can help everybody. This is able to have benefits not just within the QA team, but also outside of the QA team. So to conclude, I think my biggest takeaway is that we really should put more effort into collaborating within the company. You could say that, you can get this information for the questions I had. You can just reach out to people on Twitter or other Slack channels related to testing, etc. And I can, but there's just something more powerful when you are in union with other testers at your organization and you bring the knowledge that you found outside and bring it in, and you're able to communicate across teams. It's really effective and powerful. And that leads me to my final point, which is an African proverb that I'm sure many of you may have heard before. And it says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And I know I've left this on quite a philosophical note, but it just goes to show how deep QA can get. And I hope that what I've shared today inspires some of you who are listening, especially within the test community. And thanks for listening. And if you're interested in hearing my thoughts on similar topics to this, or you have your own questions and things that you like to discuss relating to QA, then do feel free to follow me on Twitter, because that's where I'm most active. And it could be like 11 p.m. at night and an idea just comes to my head. And I'm like, let me tweet this, and I guarantee someone will respond. And no matter how extreme the question is. So, but yeah, that's it. Thanks for listening, and I hope that it has been useful.
Cool. Thanks a lot, Joe. I mean, first of all, we are like so much on time. It's we said that it's going to take 45 minutes, and it took 44. So that's just perfect. Right. So we have some questions. The fun one, I thought you mentioned Bird Eats Bug. What does the tool do? So maybe like if you're interested, stick around. We can show this at the end. But other questions.
Thanks a lot. I mean, first of all, we are
like so much on time. It's going to take 45 minutes, and it took 44, so that's just perfect. Right. So we have some questions. The the fun one. I thought you mentioned Birdie's bug. What does the tool do?
Sorry for the technical issues. Joe, can you hear me twice?
We can show this at the end. But other questions. Thanks a lot. I mean, first of all, we're like so much on time. It's going to take 45 minutes, and it took 44. So.
Joe, can you hear me? Hello?
I'm hearing an echo.
Sorry for the technical issues. Like, can you hear me twice?
Same.
Yeah.
Okay, I think it might be gone. Yeah, we can hear you twice. A big relay, exactly. That's I can also hear myself, but with a lag of like 30 seconds. Okay, let's hope that it's gone. I've turned off my microphone and turned it back on, and that's, by the way, the point of testing. So one of the questions was, why do you think testing is perceived as the bottom of the food chain, and what can be done to change that perception? So we partly answered the second question. Like the tool that we're using maybe had an issue that could have been discovered in testing. But nonetheless, I'll hand it over to you to answer that question.
Okay, so why did I feel like testing was the bottom of the food chain? That thought came from just not seeing testers speak up for themselves. So the example I gave, where I was working at Ministry of Justice, and we had these team meetings, project meetings, and it just felt like testers were dictated to. We were told, you have to test this, you have to test that, and we didn't have a say. I just felt as though, if we had our own little testing, private meetings then, and we were able to discuss amongst ourselves, it would feel like we had more status. We could go into the meetings and say, hey, we had a chat about this and we think this. But because those conversations weren't being had, it just felt as though we were just turning up and doing the job. And that's why I felt like everyone else had a say, and the impact we had was quite minimal compared to others. It doesn't happen anymore because, like I said, the things we have put in place at my current company, it means that I can go in my meetings with confidence because, I have a unit of testers that I'm able to collaborate with and speak with. So we have a voice. And at the time, I felt we didn't have a voice.
Right. So the next question is, what are the best tools for knowledge sharing?
Best tools. Okay, I'll start with externally, then I'll move to internally. But externally, it's preference. I use Twitter. I enjoy using Twitter. The reason I chose Twitter rather than using LinkedIn is because with LinkedIn, for the posts or the blog bit that you have, I had to put too much thought into writing these blogs. I did start doing it at one point. I've got loads in my drafts, which just never got published because I used to be very much a perfectionist. So before I released anything, I want to proofread it loads of times, and I'd be like, no one wants to listen to this. But I felt like with Twitter, there's a character limit for one, and any thought that comes in your mind at any time, you just post it, and you have access to a wide community, all different countries. It doesn't have to just be in the UK or limited to your network. So that's one. There's also forums online that discuss testing. There's lots of different independent test websites where you can ask questions, and they encourage you to ask questions and comment on blogs. There's Slack channels, countless Slack channels. There's Ministry of Tests, which is really common. And their website is amazing because they do have a segment where you can ask random questions, and it's very likely that a question that you have has already been answered or someone's asked it. And they have Twitter spaces quite frequently where you can just pop in and hear someone speak on a topic. A lot of the knowledge I've gained has been from Twitter, because even if I am being active, sorry, I forgot my train of thought. Even if I'm not being active on Twitter and I'm just observing, I'm learning things from other people. So it's an excellent way. Internally, tools, maybe you could have a Slack group for QA where you just discuss things in there. It doesn't always have to be, a physical meeting. Maybe you could just have a virtual meeting once a month. Just say, hey, how's everyone getting on? Is everything okay on your team? Do you want any extra support? Are you enjoying it? Just a check-in rather than just you do your job and that's it. So I hope that answers your questions. There could be others. But
right. Thank you. I mean, a bit unrelated to the topic, but I think it's still an interesting question. How do you differentiate the sanity test from the smoke test?
I was researching that.
To be honest, I've been in software development for, I think, over 10 years now, and I don't know. I would also research that.
I don't feel so bad now. I know what a smoke test is. I can answer that for sure. So I remember reading the article before that explained, it compared a smoke test to receiving a package. So imagine that you've got a delivery and, you're not really, okay, so say you've got a book delivered, it's coming a parcel. You've opened the parcel, the book looks intact. I don't really have a book next to me to demonstrate, but the book looks intact. You've just flicked through the pages. Yeah, pages are there. There's no ripped or torn pages. Everything looks okay. So then it does get to a point where I'm ready to read this book. I know that this book is intact and I can read it. That's like a smoke test. The application has been developed. There's been a new release, branch cut, or however the process is at your workplace. And it's just a quick high-level check just to make sure everything is working, things are in place, so that when you do start to do in-depth testing, you know that this product is, stable enough to be tested in depth. Hope that answers your question. As for sanity testing, I'm not sure what the difference is, but I will look at it.
Right. I'm guessing that if the new feature or like the bugs are not so big that they drive you insane, that means it passed the sanity test. That might be a dad joke, but we'll count that. Okay. You mentioned an interesting thing about knowing when to stop testing. And when do you know when to stop testing?
I do now, yeah. Didn't before. I don't know whether what I'm going to say is correct, but this is how I judge it. I test all the positive scenarios. Then once I know that this feature is working, I then move on to the negative scenarios. Test the negative scenarios, then I think of alternative scenarios, which are known as edge cases, things that users can do. It's unlikely that a lot of people will be doing it. For example, if you're testing a submit button on a form on a web page, it's unlikely that a user will be clicking it like 10, 15 times, but maybe they would if they had bad internet connection and they just want to send this form. So there's a scenario there that I would check. And so I forgot.
Like,
oh,
when
when stop testing.
Yes, yeah. When to stop testing.
That's what I thought then. Yeah, so once I've tested that, I just have a play around with it, because usually I follow test steps that I've created myself, but I always feel like just doing that final check, just overall seeing whether this feature has impacted other features. I have when I'm testing, my brain is just ticking, because I'm thinking, okay, let me check this. What impact does it have on this area of the site? Let me check that quickly. And I'm thinking of the whole journey. I'm not just thinking of the feature as an individual feature. I'm thinking of how does the data get into there and where does it go out? Maybe I should just cross-check that what I'm seeing here matches there. Once I feel content, and that's subjective, once I feel at ease and I can say to someone, I have tested this and I have confidence, that's when I know when to stop. So the example I gave at Ministry of Justice, where I was saying that I was testing and the BA that I was working with, who had formerly been a tester, he would say to me, Jo, have you checked that scenario? Have you checked this scenario? And I'd be like, no. So I know that was not tested properly. He did not have confidence in me. If I'm going to pass something, I need to have confidence, and other people need to have confidence in me. And that's when I know that this has been tested. Also, one final thing, if you are testing a particular feature, or maybe it's this feature is on multiple pages, don't just test one feature and think that's it. Test the same feature on the other page as well, just to make sure that the behavior is mirrored and there's no discrepancies. Because just because it works for one, it might not work for the other. So I try to, switch up, have a variety. If I'm doing inputs, I don't use the same inputs all the time. Switch it up.
Right. So, yeah, I think basically it's fair to say that there is no formula that you can use to define like when you're done testing, but this is what differentiates, I guess, senior testers from more junior testers, is that just this experience and know like the feeling, like the very subjective feeling in some cases of knowing that, okay, like this feels like it's safe to release that feature.
Yeah.
Right. More questions from the audience. What programming language do you advise for automation?
This is funny because before this webinar, we were both saying
yes
that if any questions come up for automation, I do manual testing. I started off, as a manual tester, and I've continued as a manual tester. So when it does come to automation, I'm not the best person to ask. There's many people on Twitter that I can reach out to, and maybe they would be able to advise on this. But yeah, it's not something I can give you an answer for.
Yeah, I think so. I'm not. Yeah, I'm not an expert on automation testing either, but we looked, at our company, we looked into several tools, and the gist, and I hope I'm relaying this information correctly, that until recently, Selenium was the go-to testing framework. And then recently Cypress has picked up, but it looks like Playwright, that's developed by Microsoft, is the cool kid on the block, and that's getting support and adoption these days. So I guess might be worth to try Playwright if you're starting with automation testing now-ish. And then a related question: what tool for test management and why? So what are you using or at your company, and if you like it or not, of course, or what you would recommend for test case management?
Okay, so there's quite a few in the market. The ones I have experience using is TestRail, which is quite popular, and Zephyr. And I've used Zephyr at 2 different companies as well. And it seemed to be effective. It does what we need it to do. But I've heard of others, and I can't remember the name. But yeah, I think just do your research, look at a few demos and just see what fits for you. The reason why at my company we switched from TestRail to Zephyr was because we felt like the product people, they weren't having access to TestRail. It was quite difficult to transfer what we were doing there and bring it to their visibility so that they could see it. So with Zephyr, if your company use Confluence and Jira, it integrates with that. And it means that everything is in one place. So if you go onto a ticket, or if a project manager goes onto a ticket, they can immediately see the test case, on the same page. And it just means that everything is quite free flowing and you can link things easily. Whereas if you're using a tool that's, not within the Zephyr Confluence toolkit that they have, it's like an extra step to try and generate reports and, kind of tie it together. But, it just depends on what works for your organization.
Right, makes sense. So I think we have 1 minute, at least, of the main time left. So I'll ask you the last question. I think it's an interesting one. Did you find software testing, or did software testing find you?
I love that. Software testing found me. It definitely found me. Something I didn't mention was that I didn't intend to be a software tester. I wanted to be a business analyst. That was my goal from day one. And when I did my training, I had, obviously, it offered the business analyst, testing and project management. And I was really hoping I could get a BA role at the end of it. And unfortunately, there were no BA roles available when I completed my training. It was just testing, and I fell into it. And at the time, I wasn't happy. I didn't really want it. I was hoping, like, I remember when I went on my placement, I was like saying to people, if there's any BA roles available that maybe I could switch, because I wasn't meant to be doing this. It didn't happen. I just ended up being stuck doing testing. But as I got into the role, I started to enjoy it. And like I mentioned during my presentation, I saw it as a stepping stone. I thought, I'm going to do testing and then I'll go to what I really want to do. But now I feel like I haven't finished yet. There's just so much to learn. Like, you asked me about sanity testing, I didn't even know the answer. So that to me is, an indication that there's so much more learning that I can do with software testing. And maybe, maybe 5-10 years from now, I might get bored and move on to something else. But for now, I am quite happy doing software testing, and I enjoy sharing what I'm learning with others as well.
And I think that actually makes sense, like business analysts and testing, there's a lot of analytical thinking that goes into testing. And I think in many cases, people don't realize that. But as you mentioned, you do need to think about all of the features working together whenever you're testing something. And it's software, so you cannot see everything at the same time, and there's a lot of logic going on in this. And I think it's also not that easy to onboard a tester, because you need to be familiar with so many assets of the product, and think about them all at the same time. Like, I think of it as a bit of a tree that's, as you mentioned, that, okay, if I do this, what possible things can go wrong? And then you test them. Hopefully they don't go wrong, but yeah, that's interesting. Okay, cool. So for everyone watching, I think we're going to be wrapping up here. So first of all, follow Joe on Twitter. We've been following Joe on Twitter. That's how we know Joe. So I recommend you do the same. And if you're interested to hear what we're doing at Birdie's Bug, stay around. I can give a quick demo. Maybe Joe can chime in some cases. You've tried the product. Maybe you can say where we can do better, or where we are the best at, which I hopefully is everywhere, of course. But anyway, let me try to share my screen if I can figure out how this works. Okay, I think you can see my screen now. So one second. Okay. So basically, what we do is we're building a tool that allows you to create pretty much perfect bug reports automatically. So let's say you're testing a new feature or a new product, and first of all, you can see that some of the images are broken, so that's clearly an issue. But then you also want to check the logical parts of it, and then you can say that, for example, I'm interested in this color and I want the quantity of 3, and then you say add to cart. Nothing happens. You say buy now, still nothing happens, and then maybe the cart is not empty. No, it is. So clearly, this is an issue. So with Bird, you have a couple of options. You can either go back and reproduce the problem and record your screen while Bird is going to be gathering all the technical information in the background. You can also take a screenshot, but in this case, a screenshot doesn't really make sense because it's a logical bug and not something like a typo. But we have this feature that we're calling instant replay. So instead of reproducing anything, you can just say watch replay, and then we'll immediately export the last couple of minutes of your actions. And then, as you can see, we've recorded all the scrolling behaviors, like the clicks and so on. And then I can say that this is the part that I'm interested in, so I can trim the recording. And then, as you can see on the side, we have console logs, we have network logs. So we have the network requests and responses for these network requests. We have some basic system information. And also, actually quite close to the question that's been asked about the best tool for automation testing. We've recently launched this feature that we call end-to-end helper. So you can convert any bird recording into an end-to-end test. Like, you still need to define assertions, of course, but you can choose, Puppeteer, for example, and then you get the script generated, and then you can edit the script and run it. So that saves about 40 to 80% of time on creating automated tests. And that's also a great way to get started when you're not that familiar with the language. This is a good stepping stone. But nonetheless, let's report this bug. So I can optionally give it a name. This is a demo, let's say. And then I can upload it to our workspace. And then we immediately copy the link so I can send it over to an engineer over Slack, although we also have a Slack integration. So if you want to notify a specific channel when a bug is reported, you can. And also we have integrations with tools like Jira that Joe mentioned earlier. So if you want to create a Jira ticket, you can do it right from our interface. So when you say share in Jira, we'll pull all of your fields from the Jira instance that you have, and then you can see the list of assignees also coming from Jira. So I can assign this to myself, and then when I say create issue, the issue is going to be created, and I can continue testing. And this is how the issue looks like in Jira. So, you have the basic environment details, but most importantly, when an engineer picks up the ticket, they have a link to the bird session. And then they can see exactly what you've experienced, and you don't need to reproduce the issue. And then lastly, we have some project management capabilities on top of it. So you can assign tags, and you can manage those tags. You can create collections. So you can have them by, like we have like bugs demos, or you can organize them by sprint. And also we have recently launched the SDK. So you can even have bug reports coming from your end users without them installing anything. And you can integrate it like we did, for example, that here we have report a bug button, and then I can do the screen recording, and the screen recording is going to end up in our SDK collection, so we'll be able to get back to the user. So that's what we're doing at BERT. I hope that makes sense to everyone, first of all. And secondly, we have a free tier, so you can try the product for free. You can keep using it for free forever. And that's, like I said, what we do. So let's hear the last time from Joe and be wrapping up here. So thanks, Joe, for joining. I think it was a very interesting session, and definitely a topic that's not discussed enough, I think, and partly why, as you mentioned, software testing has low perceived value that it actually delivers. So yeah, maybe the last words from your side.
Oh, well, I think I just want to say thank you. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak on your platform and to share this information with others. And I'm going to continue speaking about QA and helping others along my journey. So thank you to everyone that's tuned in as well.
Cool. Thanks a lot. And it's been a pleasure having you. I mean, we'll definitely stay in touch. And thanks everyone for joining. See you soon at the next webinar. Cheers.